Hi, I'm John Hallis from Dauntless Endeavors. I've got the stock off my Ruger American Rimfire, and the next part I want to talk about are the action blocks which fit down into the stock. And let's try to get a close-up here. You've got two action blocks. One is right here, that's the forward action block, and then the rear one sits right in here. Now these just are a slip fit or kind of a friction fit into the stock. I'm going to pull them out here and show you a little bit more about them. All right. The rear action block is this hunk of metal here. It contains the ejector and also the magazine release and the plunger. It's all held in place by one pin right there. And if you turn this thing sideways, it practically disassembles itself. The pin came out, and now I can pull the ejector out, and I can push it, put a little bit of finger pressure on the plunger, pop the lever out, and then take the plunger out, just that quick. This action block fits on the bottom of the action, just like that. The forward action block fits on the action just like that. Now I noticed on the forward action, probably two 45-degree angle flats milled into the bottom of the receiver, and there are two flats, and that's the only place it touches. The radius in front of and behind those two flats don't touch the action at all. So one of the things that I noticed and I wasn't really excited about is the rear action block. After pulling this apart and working on it, I've noticed that I'm getting some real shiny spots right here and along these upper edges. I'm going to turn the other side here. Like a dot right there, just and one right there. It appears that that round action is sitting on just maybe 6 or 8 burrs that are along this upper edge here. And I'm going to do something about that. I don't really like the idea of my action resting on a handful of point contacts because of burrs. So I'm going to knock the bit worst of it off with a file, and I'm going to go one step further, and I've already machined a lap that's the same diameter as the diameter of my receiver, and I'm just going to lap this surface in here until I get, I'm not going to go for 100%, but maybe 40%. I'll start and we'll see what happens. But first, let's knock off a few of the worst of these burrs. Prior to this, I hadn't touched this with a file, so all the shiny spots were strictly from just contact with the receiver. So I just quickly filed some of the worst of the burrs off there. And now we're going to head over to the lathe, put a little bit of a valve grinding compound, and see if we can't lap that surface to get a better fit. My receiver measured 1 inch and 60 thousandths in diameter, so I just turned a brass plug down to 1 inch 058. So I'm just slightly undersized and on purpose. I've got some valve grinding compound. I picked a 240 grit. I'm going to wipe this off, and I'll be right back. So after probably a minute of lapping, we've got some contact area established along this surface, a little bit on the other side there, and looks like maybe we're still working on some of these big burrs up here on the sides, on those two ears. I might touch them up with a file a little bit and speed things along, and also I'm probably going to adjust my speeds on the lathe a little bit too. I'm starting out pretty conservative. Alright, we're back in the lap here. We're going to work this a few more minutes. Alright, here we are. It actually took longer to get the compound cleaned up off of it than it did to lap the part. After I went off camera, it probably another minute was all it took. And I'm there. I don't have 100% contact, but I probably have 70 or 80% contact area, and I'm very happy with that. Now let's see if I can put this thing back together and make it look like I know what I'm doing. Alright, we're going to take the magazine retaining plunger and insert that back into the hole. I'm going to hold it in place, compress it with my finger, and we're going to insert the magazine release lever, and then we're going to drop in the ejector from the top until I see it kind of line up, all the holes line up. There's one pin holds in the ejector and the magazine release lever, and I've got it lined up pretty darn close, and you got to catch your finger underneath it all because this pin will fall out the other side just as quick as you can put it in there. So now got the pin, and I'm going to hold it so it doesn't fall out. If I actuate that, the plunger goes back and forth, the ejector's not going to fall out. Let's put it back in the stock. You notice on the stock in the bottom there where the action screws, there's actually two nice big brass washers right in the molded plastic stock. They look real nice, and also the bottom of this action block where it contacts that brass washer right there, there's no burrs on that. I'm happy with that contact area, so I'm not going to do anything to that. So let's line it up, slide it back into the stock, do the front one, slide it back into the stock, and there you have it. Now you might look at what I just did with a critical eye and say, gee, how do you know that this action is, this block and that block are holding everything perfectly axial, concentric, linear, yada, 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 and that you're not imposing any stress on that action once you crank it down, torque it down into the stock? The truth is, that's a good question, and I don't know the answer. What I do know is that I don't like my idea of my action, the receiver, nestling down on a half a dozen big old ugly burrs on there either. So to me, this is a good start. Just about time to put this rifle back together and head out to the range again. The Ruger American Rimfire is all back together after having just deburred and lapped in that rear action block. I hope you're enjoying these videos. I hope that you stick with me as we continue this journey and see what we can learn. Thanks again for your time. Have a great day and be safe.